Meth Chronicles. Yo, what's up? It's someone that's no one, and welcome back to today's report. Today's report was sent in by Safe and Sound, aka Mason, where he took methamphetamine. And here's the full report details. Okay, so another report on methamphetamine. This one coming from a good homie of mine, someone who has a ton of artwork on the channel, and that's Mason, or Safe and Sound. We've had other reports I covered in the past as well, such as his DXM reports, DPH, mushrooms, and possibly some others I think. It's been a long ass time since I covered a story of his, so I'm really excited to be releasing this. I'll link some of his other stories down below too, so make sure to check them out. And this is also a part 1, so comment and like if you want to see a part 2, and I'm sure he'd be happy to write it up. Anyways, I'm sure you'll enjoy this, so without further ado, let's dive right into this. Meth Chronicles Part 1, Chapter 1. I am Mason, a recovered alcoholic and addict. These tales recount my past and history with addiction. Please respect these experiences for what they're worth. The first time I had ever tried methamphetamine, I was 18 years old, probably around 170 pounds body weight. While at the time I didn't think I had any drug problems, people around me always told me I had an addictive personality. Weed and DXM especially had me whipped at times, but I never thought I had a problem. I thought everyone else had a problem with me doing what I enjoyed. Things weren't an issue until stimulants became my Achilles heel. I was encouraged, near forced into programs and hospitals for my drug problems many times before, as a result of DXM, weed, mushrooms, alcohol, etc. But all of these times I considered it to be the circumstances that others had a sheet-like crux indoctrinated into them that solidified their bias that drugs are bad, and therefore I couldn't possibly be improving myself with drugs. All this being put aside, I can admit that my personality wasn't perfect at all at the time. At 18, I had somewhat determined that being inevitably intoxicated by DXM, weed, alcohol, etc. was not a good move for daily function. I was on the quest to find something I could act normal on, but still feel better. This brings about the theme of an underlying disease. Obviously, I wasn't necessarily happy with my normal day-to-day frame of mind's perspective, so obviously it needed to be altered, or so I thought. Anywho, I eventually found amphetamines. I started with Adderall, just buying it off a friend who had a prescription, and I was mildly reasonable with it. I took them before work, and that was all. After about 2 weeks of this, I noticed I felt drained and essentially dismal on the weekends, so my use became daily. I began upping dosages and started using Vyvanse as well. My buddy Damien was my plug for those, and eventually he started to tell me about meth and how much better it was, plus way cheaper. Somehow I managed to convince myself that amphetamines as a drug class weren't too horribly risky, and I had a fairly delusional rationale that I thought was sound at the time. In hindsight, it was not. But that's basically the definition of a delusion. I had previously watched Drugs Incorporated, other documentaries, and even the Drug Classrooms video about meth. I started to feel the gears and cogs of my brain, as they began to consider the fact that I was taught in school that all drugs are horrible and that they cause immediate harm. But seriously, I had tried weed and it was pretty mild. Plus, it wasn't at all horrifying. And in my experience, shrooms were harmless and fun. Plus alcohol was way more harmful and a problem for me thus far. So I had sort of lost faith in the whole system and its teachings, and the laws therein it. I convinced myself I would stick to low to moderate dosages, only use it before work, and stick to intranasal use and a few other rules that of course got broke pretty quickly later on. One night after getting paid, I messaged Damien to tell him I was looking for meth, or ice as we called it. He was versed in it, already having 2, if not more, arrests related to it. Later I found out his father was a fairly big-time dealer in the Midwest town I'm from. Damien was excited to say the least, and told me we would leave to get it early the next morning. Around 5 a.m., I received the "Let's go" message from him. I got dressed and hopped into my 1994 Ford Ranger. I later affectionately referred to it as a her and called her Delilah, or the Methmobile, or Tweak-Up truck. Anywho, I went, put gas in the tank, and withdrew the money I needed for investment. I swung by Damien's place and picked him up. Later I found out there were lots of places in town that had what I wanted. But on this day, we had to go to Marengo, which was about 30 minutes away, to meet up with TJ, who was going to be playing the role of the dealer on that morning. My younger self thought he had to be a standard dealer, like the average run-of-the-mill pot dealers and mushroom sellers I'd encountered previously. Upon further investigation, I learned that in the more addiction-prone drug community, there was a complex web of junkies buying and selling while using their supply only to get their next re-up. When we arrived, I was instructed to drive down this gravel road and TJ would meet us. I assumed he would drive. No, he was walking around at sunrise, dressed like a homeless person. And yes, I should have seen this as a major red flag, but I wanted to go through with the transaction regardless. I spent $60 for a half gram, which was a huge ripoff, but Damien had neglected to tell me that he was using my money to get himself a point, or 1/10 of a gram for himself. TJ was throwing in a homemade pipe made from an exhaust hose, and a light bulb from a headlight. I'm gonna guess he garbage picked. The pattern of lies, deception, and selfish manipulation seemed to just be the beginning as I dove into the meth world. TJ got in the passenger door, forcing Damien to slide into the middle of the cab, so we all scrunched up as close as possible. Thankfully, TJ didn't smell. It was probably 30 degrees out, so no one was sweating. I watched while still driving slowly, as instructed, because it's less suspicious. Even though we just picked up possibly the photo-identical dictionary definition of a tweaker, no one was even remotely nearby. No houses, no cars, dead silent countryside back road at sunrise in the middle of winter. TJ proceeded to jitter and pull out an old Crown Royal bag and give Damien the pipe. I gave him the money, and then TJ pulled out an old pen, which he unscrewed and revealed the small baggie hidden within. He was obviously paranoid, so he hid it that way, which I tried to just ignore as much as possible. TJ counted his cash, hugged Damien awkwardly, and then opened the door to the still-moving truck and hopped, taking a few steps before falling and rolling on the gravel. But then he hopped up all slick-like and walked about his way. I was in disbelief at what he did, while Damien hopped back over to his seat and closed the door. On the ride back, Damien wasted no time loading the pipe and taking several hits of my meth. Not his own, I mind you. But after about 3, he offered to both hold the pipe and lighter for me while I drive, and teach me how it smoked. I agreed, considering I hoped that some intoxication would make the whole scenario a bit less irritating. He taught me to hold the flame at least a half-inch from the glass, and as the crystals began to liquefy, I would need to gently roll the pipe side to side to avoid burning it. The goal was to spread the puddle across the pipe as much as possible while inhaling the vapor at the same time. I'm not proud to say that I got very good at this over time. When I took my first hit, it was probably a small to medium one that produced a decent puff of a cloud. I was amazed at how effortless and smooth it was. No taste really, no burn, no cough. Like fresh air, but better. I felt like I could breathe for the first time. It felt more clean, more healthy, and more pleasurable than Adderall. It felt like I was just then alive for the first time. I knew that this was a secret joy hidden from humanity with scare tactic propaganda, and lies with law enforcement involved on top of all of it. It felt like I found the peanut butter for my jelly. It became compulsive immediately. That day, while pretending to be sober around my family and loved ones, I compulsively snuck away to take little bumps in the bathroom or in my car. I knew that this was already out of my control, but I couldn't argue with how much more happy and alive I felt. Snorting was less enjoyable though. I felt a subtle burn, and the drips tasted awful, but not unbearable. I was more social than ever, and enjoyed Monday walking and working. It felt like life was set to the most positive setting. Such an amazing first impression of the drug that ruined all drugs for me just 3 years later.